Welcome to this new hyperrealistic painting course. Many of you will probably be hesitant to engage in such a difficult genre of painting. But I can assure you that with the right advice and teachings, you will be able to achieve a surprising result already from this first course. This video course is so detailed that you can quickly become skilled in oil painting, even if it's your first time. This is the subject we'll be painting in this class. This is the same subject with an accentuated brightness to capture the details in the shadow. I'd advise you to paint while following my demonstration, and in the meantime, take inspiration from the images shown above. I suggest you take a screenshot of these photos and print them, so that you have as much visual information as possible during the execution. We'll paint on a 24 by 18 centimeters or a little bit bigger canvas. You can also use another type of support, canvas board, wooden board, etc. And this will be the final result. As you can see, the painting deviates a lot from the photographic image. The subject should simply be a source of inspiration. We have to interpret and personalize it without having to worry about respecting the tone and the details of the real subject. To start, just repeat my gestures. When you have acquired a good technical pictorial mastery, this exercise will come natural to you. During the lessons, with you, I'll create the palette with the shades that we'll need. During my execution, besides the written description, the color tones and the type of brush recommended will also appear on the video. In this first lesson, we'll carry out the drawing, which should not be refined and accurate. Limit yourselves to define the shape, the lights and the shadows without exaggerating with signs and hatches. The more you draw on the canvas, the greater the risk that your design will appear in transparency under the painting. The full course is divided into 3 videos with 4 lessons. At the beginning of every lesson, in addition to the execution time, you'll find the list of materials, colors and brushes that will be needed. The presentation is over. I wish you all the best in your work. Let's draw the subject, the apples, on a 24 by 18 centimeters fine texture canvas with quite a hard pencil. I usually use a 0.5 millimeters 3H. Let's prepare all the supplies we need for this first lesson. A roll of paper towels, turpentine oil, palette, medium, quick drying medium, liquid original. For the color solution, we'll use a desiccant instead of the oil. Black. I suggest you use extra fine paints. Avoid using low-quality paints. Titanium white, raw umber. The brushes are fine, both in marten and synthetic. Round number 2 paintbrush. Round number 5 paintbrush. Flat paintbrush. Fan paintbrush. Let's start by squeezing a little bit of black on the palette. A little bit of raw umber. And a little bit of titanium white. Now we take a spatula and we set a part of the black paint aside. We take some of the raw umber paint and we blended it to the black that we earlier set aside. We'll get a shade that we'll call with the number 2. Now we take a part of the number 2 shade and we blend it to the remaining raw umber. And we'll call this shade with the number 3. Now we squeeze some more raw umber paint, which we'll call it with the number 4. Let's clean the spatula from the paint with some absorbent paper or a cloth. Let's set aside part of the raw umber number 4, and by blending it with a little bit of white, we'll make a new shade, the number 5. Here's our color palette, ready for this first lesson. At this stage, we dip the paintbrush number 5 into the medium and we remove the excess on the absorbent paper. We take the number 1 black color, taking care of mixing it with the medium on our paintbrush. Let's start painting the background, defining the apple's outlines and the horizontal line. The part delimiting the background from the support surface of the apples. Let's try to stretch out the paint without leaving different thicknesses or transparencies. The paint needs to be opaque. If it's not, you might have exceeded with the medium, or your paintbrush is dirtied with the turpentine oil. For convenience, let's turn the canvas to foster natural brushstroke movements. Now that the apple's outline have been made safe, we can use a bigger paintbrush, the flat paintbrush. Let's change the paintbrush and go back to using the number 5. And let's refine what's left. At this point, if we look at the painting inclined towards a light source, we'll still see some brushstroke marks. And here's when the fan paintbrush comes into play, which must be used strictly dry. Be gentle and use only the extreme part of the paintbrush. Start brushing from top to down without worrying about staining the apples, because we need to remove the thickness of paint that has formed on the apple's outline. Remember to often clean the paint off the fan paintbrush, brushing it on the absorbent paper. Let's make sure there aren't any signs of brushstrokes by inclining the painting towards a light source. Now we'll focus on the apple's shadows, still using black paint and the number 5 paintbrush. Let's remove the excess paint on the brush by brushing it on the absorbent paper. Let's wash the brush in the turpentine oil and then dry it carefully. Let's dip the number 5 paintbrush on the medium, then remove the excess. And we pick the paint of the first shade we have created, raw plus raw umber. Let's start coating with the paint number 2 near the black background without touching it. Now we start fading the shadows, hatching between the two colors. We must try to carry on with continuous and linear brushstrokes all along the length. After we have finished one section of nuance, we start again, equally with the next, still between two shades, with short strokes. This way, we'll have created an additional nuance between the two pre-existing shades. Let's clean the brush from the excess paint on the absorbent paper. We charge the brush with number 3 paint and we repeat the process. After we have finished the coating of the shades, we'll return to blend this part of the painting, following the previous hatching process. Let's clean the brush from the excess paint on the absorbent paper and then wash it in the turpentine oil, taking care of drying it afterwards. Let's dip the number 5 paintbrush on the medium, then remove the excess with some absorbent paper. Now, with the number 5 brush and number 4 paint, we go and complete the coating of the apple support surface, trying not to brush over the paint we previously laid. Let's be careful not to dilute this paint too much in the medium because it's semi-opaque and tends to a slight transparency. At this point, we can start painting on the previously laid paint, hatching with the brush soaked in number 4 paint, proceeding with the nuance. It's important not to jump from one side to the other, but to proceed by hatching between the two colors with order. Only this way, we'll be able to carry out a pleasant nuance. If we want to lighten it, the hatching brush stroke will start from the lighter color to the darker one. If we'd rather darken it, the process will be in reverse. Now it's shadow time. Let's switch to the number 3 shade and then brush between the two colors, blending the outlines by hatching. Now we'll need a smooth marten brush without a use tip to be used dry as a small fan brush. In the absence of this brush, you can use a brand new one. Try to open up the bristles by passing your fingers sideways, like you have just seen me do. Let's take another look at the painting by inclining it towards a light source. As you can see, there are evident brushstroke marks. Let's take a dry fan brush and pass our fingers sideways to open up the bristles. Let's start blending the dark parts and then proceed with order towards the light parts, hatching the brush strokes. Let's clean the brush on the absorbent paper. Let's remove the paint, and if we notice that the bristles have come together, we can use a new dry brush. At this stage, let's give some brightness to the support base by using the number 5 shade. Now let's pick another fan brush to define the last nuances. Let's brush smoothly against the apples without worrying about staining them. Let's brush smoothly against the apples without worrying about staining them. Let's check the result. Opaque parts are not a flaw or a mistake. With the final coating, they will disappear. Let's fix any other noticeable brushstrokes, and we have come to the end of our first lesson. We will start the second lesson after 24-48 hours to let the paint dry.